The only real thing there is the now. One of the points that I've been very concerned to make, and it's certainly in a great tradition which reaches back to the I Ching and Pythagoras, is the notion of resonance, that the now is a resonance phenomenon in which aspects of the future and aspects of the past clash together or interfere with each other in such a way as to create a kind of standing wave. Resonance of moments far in the past, potentially far in the past and far in the future, are creating the phenomenon of the now. This explains the apparently irrational phenomenon of fads and fashions. It may be, that late Roman times and the early 21st century are somehow creating an interference pattern which is the present moment. It is rich in its anticipation of the far future and surprisingly tenacious in its adherence to themes in design philosophy and social behavior that really go back to late Roman times or perhaps dynastic Egyptian times. The fabric of time is a holographic, fractal, resonating, rich, organic, self-coherent process. It's a synergy. We are continually remaking the past in the present. A perfect example of this is the term Renaissance. The Renaissance was not invented until the 1850s, when a bunch of German historians, looking back at the 15th century, discovered the Renaissance.
Something had happened.
And so it came to be, 350 years after its occurrence. This is a clue to how language is really the fabric of our reality. It is what actually happened in some kind of ontological sense of actually is a very small contributing component to the history we live with. Marx redefined and recreated history. Robert Bork would do the same thing. Everybody realizes that to advance their agenda in the present, they must remake the past, and a great deal of political shenanigans in the 20th century have operated on that principle. I always think of Goebbels' comment. He said, "When I hear the word culture, I reach for my revolver." This is a perfect encapsulation of the Nazi need to remake or even to destroy the past so that the present can be reshaped in whatever form the current group in power seeks to shape it. The Chinese have understood this for millennia. This is why at several points in Chinese history all the books have been burned, in order essentially to make a clean slate of the past, so that from the present moment new myths, new ordering principles could be projected back on the past, and then that immense power and efficacy that we attribute to past things could be utilized in the present for political purposes. I think we need to realize that language arises inevitably out of the organization of the neural matrix of human beings, so that whenever we create a system of explanation, whatever it is explaining, it cannot help but be primarily a map of our own neural organization. Living beings, including ourselves, are syntactical statements by the cosmos. We learn to say things that had never been said before, that concretized realities that we now live with completely without awareness. Throughout history, language has been allowed to evolve pretty much as an unconscious process. But I think now, as we close distance with this flowing together of everything, this cultural global concrescence, we do not have the luxury of an unconscious. And so, in the same way that we get rid of thermonuclear weapons and disease bombs and these sorts of things, we also need to get rid of poisonous linguistic processes and assumptions which occlude clear thinking. Our politics is haunted by a lack of clear thinking. And I'm amazed, actually, at how much of our communication with each other is extremely low grade. We really do largely communicate with grunts and nods. It's very rare that people draw themselves together, collate and make cogent their thoughts, and then lay it on to somebody else in such a way that the thought comes into being. I think the great political task is to refine and accelerate the evolution of language. This has always been unconsciously sensed. This is why writers and poets are intuitively felt by power groups to be somehow dangerous, out of all proportion to their numbers or the numbers of their followers. It's because they tamper with the most sacred province of the state, which is the pool of linguistic modalities that allow realities to be concretized. The history of language has had a tendency to emphasize certain areas and de-emphasize others. In other words, in our Western languages, because there is this subject-object dualism built into syntax, we have evolved an extremely sophisticated language for the handling of objects, from quarks right up to quasars. But notice how utterly impoverished our emotional vocabulary is. Anything which is amorphous and behaves like a field rather than being tightly clustered into a local domain, we have very little to say about it.